Hey everyone, welcome to a video where a man with a British accent talks about a man with a British accent, or at least in the English translation of Kingdom Hearts. Yes, I'm going to be talking about Luxord. Luxord is my second favourite Kingdom Hearts character, has been for a while, ever since his appearance in the second game, as brief as it was. I've always been a particular fan of his. Now, is that partly due to the fact that he has that accent? Well, maybe. But even despite that, I think he has a really great personality. I really like his role in the story so far. As small as it's been, I think there's a lot to come. And I love his weapons and his powers, and we're going to go into a bunch of stuff about him in this video. I guess this is more of a rambly thing. Maybe? I don't really know what I'm doing with that series. So I'm just going to call this its own video, but it is an unscripted sort of video. So let's talk about why Luxord is cool. And I think first we have to address the elephant in the room, and that's his name and the way it's pronounced. Now, of course, I think many of us pronounced it as Luxord back in the day, until KH3 came and changed our perspective on things. Vexen saying Luxord was certainly a big what moment? And then Sora says the same, so it's not just Vexen with his weird pronunciation. Nope, that's how you say it, Luxord. Maybe that makes more sense to the actual character name in terms of from a Japanese origin. I don't really know. I think a lot of us said Luxord because that's just how we read it, and obviously it sounds like luck. And Luxord is a character who is associated with luck. So it did make sense, but hey, that's the way it is now, and that's the way I'm going to call him in this. And alongside his name, we also have his title. Everyone in the old organization has titles, and his was the Gambler of Fate. Now, I think this is one of the coolest titles in the series. Imagine being the Gambler of Fate. Now, okay, it doesn't mean you are literally the gambler of all fate, but it's a really badass title to have. It makes you feel very important, so I'm quite a fan of that. And I guess we can talk a bit about his physical design. He's got the black coat. There's not really a whole lot to talk about with that because it's a black coat. Yes, they all differ from each other, and Luxord's main defining feature of his is probably his sleeves. He has very long, very wide sleeves. His hands are actually pretty much all the way inside his sleeves. So I guess it's good for sleight of hand, you know, card tricks and stuff. But otherwise, yeah, there'll be a few sort of differences like the shoulders, but I don't really care to talk about that because it's just black coat, right? I'm just hoping for another outfit in the future, something like a tuxedo or a suit would definitely suit him well. Also, what would be nice to see in the future is his blue eyes to come back. Of course, in KH3, he's got the yellow Naughted eyes. So the only modern model we have of him is him with the yellow eyes instead of the blue. So that would be nice to see. I feel like with him and Larxene as well, it's slightly unfortunate with the yellow Naut eyes because they have blonde hair. So it kind of just makes it pop a little bit less, you know, makes the whole design pop a bit less. So when they get their natural eye colors back and we see it, I think that'd be pretty cool. Something else that's funny about Luxord is his hair is fairly normal for a Kingdom Hearts character at least. Characters in the series do tend to have some pretty crazy hairstyles. So when you see someone with a more normal cut, it's like, oh, okay, that's quite normal. Yeah, it's cool, I like it. It's short, it's a bit different from other people. So that kind of makes it distinctive in a way, despite being quite simple. So yeah, that's cool. And he also has facial hair. He has this goatee. Not many characters with that either, so another thing that makes him stand out a bit. And as far as changes go into the new engine, I've said before how I feel like a lot of the characters going into the Unreal Engine, they all got a softer appearance just because of how that engine is. With the old Kingdom Hearts engine, it was a bit sharper, a bit more edged. Whereas Unreal Engine has got that softness to it. So a lot of the characters I feel like they changed a little bit, but they still generally look the same, and Luxord still is recognizable. But I do think he had one of the most drastic changes going into KH3. Majorly, I would say it's because of his chin. It got shortened quite a bit, and that really changed the whole appearance of his face. He looks younger now, I'd say. And I know not everyone's a fan of the change. I'm fine with it, to be honest. I don't really mind. I think he looks good in both versions, and he definitely looks a bit friendlier now, I would say, which does complement what happens with his character. Oh, and there's a nice detail that he has a different, either a different model or a different filter sort of thing applied across it. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but in the Caribbean he looks different. He looks a bit more realistic, a bit more gritty, suits for that world very nicely. It's also worth talking about his voice. The voice actor in English translation is Robin Atkin-Downes, one of my favourite voice actors actually. He's from London, and he appears in loads of games. You've probably heard him. The medic from Team Fortress, or someone like Brynjolf from Skyrim.
Sorry lad, I've got important things to do.
He's in Metal Gear Solid and Halo. He also does a bunch of additional voices in games, like in the Arkham games, for example. He's got a very versatile voice. He can do accents, but definitely a distinctive nature, which I can really pick up on now because I've heard him so much. He was also Davy Jones in Cage 3, and I really like his voice for Luxord. Now, it did change a little bit, and this tends to happen when you voice a character in 2005 and then come back to them, years later. So I guess in Cage 2 and I suppose Days as well, he has a bit more of a sharper, a less throaty voice compared to now. So 2.5 and Cage 3, he sounds a bit softer, I suppose, in a way, a bit more breathy. I don't exactly know the proper words to describe this, but in Cage 2 he had a bit more of a upper class style, I think, than he does now, although he still is that quite posh, I guess, British accent.
The darkness of men's hearts, drawn to these cursed medallions, and this heartless, a veritable maelstrom of avarice. I wonder, are they worthy to serve Organization 13?
You tell me all about that chest. I will get you whatever it is you want.
But I like both, to be honest, and again, I'd say the newer voice does actually fit his slightly friendlier approach that he has now. We also have to talk about other elements of his design. His element is time. Now, not in the usual time travel young Xehanort sort of approach. No, it's more about imposing time limits. So you could say it's a bit weak, like that's the element, time, but it's not really properly used. But in a way, if you think about it, it's quite powerful that he can just impose a time limit on someone and force them to play mini games, or they lose, right? And they're done. So yeah, that can backfire on him, but he's perfectly aware of that. I think it's pretty cool though. Having time as a power is always cool. I just think stuff like that, and like Xigbar's space. Interesting, by the way, that one has time and one has space. But yes, it's pretty nice. And also his weapons are cards, which is very unique to wield cards. Now yes, there's other characters in other media that have cards as their weapon, but in Kingdom Hearts, I think it's really interesting. They're very flexible, and I don't mean that as like literally flexible, but well, I guess they are. But they can change sides. You can have huge cards that block people off. You can have small size cards that he just throws at you as part of the boss. He has cards that have different elements. He has cards that he can go into and become a card. I just think it's a really interesting power to have. It's a bit different, I think most of the organization weapons are pretty cool. It's just his is so much more abstract. It's kind of like Zexin with his book, It's just something a bit different about it, and I really do appreciate that. And I suppose we've got to get onto his character a bit more. I'm not really a huge person talking about characters, but with Luxord, obviously we have his approach to life, and that everything's a game, it's a gamble. It's a really cool approach to have. He's a pretty chill guy, generally. He seems to just enjoy the ride. He just wants to see what happens. What's the result? Let's take a gamble. Let's roll the dice and see what happens. It's nice, actually, that really blends well with things like his boss battles. It's not just a case of, yeah, he has this power, but his personality's not really got anything to do with his power. No, they're very much linked. He plays games and his bosses, and that's how he wields power, and that's his personality. He plays games, he gambles. It's all about luck and fate and chance. Of course, I say fate. He doesn't really seem set on anything having a fate in that. It's just up to the cards in a way. He says as much in some of his cutscenes. He knows that he may lose, and he doesn't seem to really care. He seems to enjoy the thrill of it. He likes playing with Sora, it seems. In fact, yes, he is more friendly towards Sora than a lot of other people. Maybe not so much in Cage 2. It was like in Cage 2, maybe the Roxas loss and everything, he was kind of harsh to Sora, but he didn't really talk to him much. But we see in Days that he was pretty friendly towards Roxas. He wasn't his friend or anything. He says in one of his reports, in one of his journal writings, that he finds himself envying the children and how they become nobodies but seem to retain their selfhood a bit more. And that was a really interesting little writing. You don't get too much from him, so when we see those little bits about Luxord, I think it's quite nice to actually read those and get a bit deeper into a more mysterious character. In Cage 3, he gets a little bit more friendly with Sora. He still kind of mocks him in the Caribbean. He still teases him, and he still has the approach of a villain. But by the end of the Keyblade Graveyard, he's definitely got a respect for Sora. And it seems Sora has one back as well when he says, "You want to play a game sometime when we're just guys?" And Luxord's like, "Yeah, I'd like that." And gives him the card, of course. Get onto that in a bit. So I really do like that. He's a villain, but he didn't feel like too much of a bad guy, Yes, he did enjoy sometimes having some evil laughter and all of that. but it seems like he was more like he just enjoyed the role and just wanted to play around a bit. Oh, and it's also nice to look at that angle of his character about how he's usually in a serving role in some way, and he just kind of accepts that that's his lot in life and he just works around it. He's always going on about being on the bottom rung and, you know, not knowing everything that's going on. He's not really after power or importance or influence. Yeah, maybe he'll make a slight comment about it, you know, maybe he'll say like, oh, if only the whispers carried down to the bottom rung. Seems a bit sort of begrudgingly accepting it, you know, he's a bit maybe miffed about it, but it would appear at the end of the day he doesn't care too much. And maybe that's because he has his own goals in mind. We see a little bit of these goals when he talks to other characters. In Cage 3, we have his scene with Vexen, I think is really interesting, especially when Vexen accuses him of treachery. And Luke says like, don't be absurd, I serve the organization. But I think, yeah, but do you? I mean, you do, but do you actually care about the organization? I don't think he does. But it was a really fun interaction with those two, actually. I thought that was nice. Since they were in different games, you know, one was in Chain of Memories and one was in Cage 2, we never really got to see much. They didn't talk in days. So when we actually got to see that with this game, that was fun. I like how Luxord talked about Vexen's stuffy studies. It's just obvious that Luxord's not an academics kind of guy, right? He's more about games. He's a gamer like all of us, oh god. But no, what I really enjoyed is the Remind scene with Xigbar. This was a very cool scene. It's two characters that play off each other really well. I think this is when Kingdom Hearts can really be at its peak. It's when it's got these zany characters that really play off each other and make for a great conversation. Luxord cornering Xigbar is just really cool to see. Of course, Xigbar being Lushu, he's playing all the cards generally. He's got the hand, if we put it in Luxord terms. But, you know, Xigbar knows what's up. He's Lushu, he's got his own schemes, he's kind of been playing everyone for a fool. But Luxord knows that there's something up. Now, he doesn't know exactly what, it seems, but he does know, he's sussed it out. And to see Xigbar get cornered and flustered a little bit and be confused, knowing that Xigbar is this person, this ancient Keyblade wielder who has just traveled so much, seeing that scene where Luxord is in control of the situation is like, I know you're up to something, but I don't really care, and then just leaves. It's just like, wow, he's really badass in that scene. I don't think enough people talk about it, to be honest, how good he is in that scene. And Xigbar too. They're both really good, and I hope we get more with those two, because they're really fun to play off each other, and I do think they'll be in a sort of opposing role with each other. He gives Sora the wild card. He seems to know that something's going to happen to Sora that he might need it. It could turn the tables. He knows something's going to happen. I would say he probably knows that Sora is going to end up abusing the power of waking. After all, in the Caribbean, he says this.
But such compulsive behavior is eventually going to bring you nothing but sorrow.
So I think Luxord knows something's about to happen, and that all ties into something else too. And this is spoilers for the Remind secret ending, by the way, so if you haven't watched that yet, you know, skip ahead. Maybe I'll put a timestamp in the description or something. But yes, in the secret ending, we see Yozora in the car in Quadratum, and the driver is intentionally obscured, but he has a similar hairline to Luxord, and he has the same voice actor, which Robin Atkindown soft confirmed on Twitter. Now, it could just be a red herring, could just be another character that Robin Atkindown has voiced, who just happens to be a driver for Yozora, and who happens to look a bit like Luxord and has a similar voice. I doubt it though. I don't really think they're doing a red herring with this. I think that was just intentionally put in there to just give even a little bit more hype to the scene, and a bit more mystery and something to think about. I think that is Luxord somebody. I mean, it adds up with the rest of what's going on. Giving Sora the wild card, talking about how Sora's compulsive behavior is going to bring him sorrow. You know, that sort of thing makes perfect sense. That he would be in Quadratum, and hey, maybe that's why his hairstyle's more normal, because he's from a more normal world, the unreality, which is more like our reality. I don't know, that's maybe a bit silly to say. But yes, I think this is most likely him, and we're hopefully going to find out his real name. Now, if you like, you can pick what you think his real name will be, or what you'd like it to be. Either way, reply in the comments with any Luxord somebody names if you like. I don't really have any preference, I don't care. As long as it doesn't sound really silly, then I'm perfectly fine with it. But what is he actually doing? Does he have his own plans? Is he just, once again, on the bottom rung and is just working for someone else? Is he more loyal to Yozora, or more loyal to whoever's actually in charge of this whole thing? I have a feeling he's not really with the Master of Masters and all that lot. I think he's more likely to be against that sort of thing. Maybe he'll be a neutral character, but I think he might end up on our side, especially given the wildcard thing. But I don't want to go too deep into this, because you could do your own big theory videos. I know there's people who have done that. but I don't like talking too much about specific theories or what's actually going down. I prefer just to think a little bit about possibilities, but otherwise just see where it goes and try and enjoy the ride if I can. But there's a couple more things to talk about here. We have boss fights. Now, as Cage 2 boss, I think it's really fun. The data fight too, actually, I think is a really enjoyable data fight. I just don't like the gimmick at the end by changing the command menu. You have to do the inputs, and really pause buffering is the way to deal with that. And you can skip the DM, but I would rather not have to skip a DM and do something specific, right? I just don't really like that, because it's like, okay, it's all down to this. You've gone through the entire fight, and now press a button at the right time. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of that sort of gimmick, but the rest of the fight I think is good. Watching the cards shuffle around and seeing where he is and interrupting some of it. And you can play his games if you want, or you can just do something like reflect. And I love his movements and his jumping around. That's really cool. And then of course, well, we have his Cage 3 graveyard boss. It's not even really worth talking about because it's terrible. It's just he hides in the cards like 3 times and he summons Marluxia and Larxene to hit you. Great. That's what a Xemnas power-up gets you? It makes you weaker than you were? Okay, that's a bit pathetic. Xemnas really didn't help very much there, did he? I mean, think about it. He traps Mickey in a card. I guess that's Xemnas' influence. But in Cage 2, he manages to just get rid of all of the allies, and it's just him and Sora. He could just do that already. So why is this whole Xemnas power-up thing needed? I don't really know what's going on there. It's a dumb boss fight anyway. But then we have his data fight in Cage 3. We have his limit cut appearance, and this definitely redeemed the Luxord boss fight in this game, because this is really fun, I think. I know not everyone likes it. I know people kind of see it as the easy one, the easiest one. And yeah, it probably is the easiest one. As long as you can do the gimmicks properly, you can do the games properly. And there are some difficulties with the games because of the jankiness, obviously, trying to hit the cards that are going around him. And Sora will sometimes not hit properly or lock onto something else. Can be a bit iffy, but I've kind of found a way around it, and generally I can do it fine now. But yeah, I think it's a really fun fight. There's just interesting things about it, like if you do well at avoiding the cards, or disposing of them with Thunder, for example, when he does the magic ones. You don't have too many left on the ground, so when he shuffles himself, there's not many to pick from, and it's quite easy to see which one he's in. That's a really cool little mechanic. I think he could do with maybe a few more moves, just to make it a little bit more interesting in the damage phase, when you can't hurt him and he's damaging you, I mean. Maybe a few more moves just to make it a bit more detailed, so it's not too simple. Maybe it's a little bit simple as it is. But I like that it's slower than other data fights. It's not frantic. It's got a more chill vibe. It's one of my favorites simply because it's not all over the place like some of the data fights, and I actually feel like I can keep up with it, right? I think the games he has anyway are better than the gimmick at the end of Cage 2, because they don't change the command menu, which is something I don't like. But Cage 3's DM is a bit weird, I'll admit. I kind of found some fun with it, just sort of scanning the cards and seeing, okay, where is he? Or if he flips himself but he hasn't shuffled yet, then you know, oh, he's still in that one. And if you remember correctly, you get it right and you get rewarded for that. It's quite chance and luck based. Fits for him perfectly, for sure. It really fits for him. It can just make it a bit tedious because it does go on a fair while, that DM. And it's so chance based, and then you just got to dodge the one move generally. I wouldn't say it's the best DM ever, but I don't think it's terrible. It's maybe just a bit too long and maybe a bit too random, right? And maybe a bit too repetitive. Still, I really like the vibe of it. I like all the cards surrounding you. I like that you feel like you're inside a game, like you're on a poker table or something, you know? It's just quite interesting. Then related to the boss fights, we have music. Now he's had the organization theme, that's general. We have his death organization theme. Most of the characters got their own for their deaths, or quote-unquote deaths, in Cage 3 at the end in the Keyblade Graveyard. And his definitely has not like a sinister vibe at all to it. Unlike some of the others like Xemnas, which sounds a bit more sinister. His has got, yeah, it's a little bit sad, but it's got a light touch. It sounds like him and Sora, they're getting on well here. You know, there's respect, and he's going off on good terms in a way. So yeah, I actually do like that little remix. But in terms of his battle themes, we have the 13th Struggle. That's what he had in Cage 2. Mostly because he was a solo fight. That's how it kind of works. You know, Axel had the 13th Struggle as well. And that came from Chain of Memories, where most of the fights there had 13th Struggle with the organization. But Luxord's really taken the 13th Struggle as his own theme, and part of that is down to Cage 3's data fight. Larxene had a remix of the 13th Struggle and Remind as well, but hers was a bit more standard, a bit more like the original, with some new bits of course, with a remix that does suit her, quite chaotic, but also a tinge of sadness in there. But Luxord's, it goes in a different direction. and it builds upon the original 13th Struggle but really puts its own spin on it. This arrangement was by Yuko Komiyama, who also did the 13th Dilemma remix for Xigbar, which is also very good. Luxord's remix of the 13th Struggle in the data fight is more chill. It definitely feels like the music to play a game of cards to. It's not super upbeat, but it's still got a high stakes feel, right? It still feels like a boss theme. It's just not really in your face, it's not really loud, it's just quite chilled out. But what's also cool is it has some new bits, actual additions to the song that we haven't heard before. I'll just play a couple of them now. This kind of feels like his own theme evolving. Now I expect in the future games, if we see more of him, he's not going to have completely his own theme, but I think he'll have, if we fight him again, or even maybe in cutscenes, I think he'll have either his own sort of spin on the organization theme, or he'll have this remix of the 13th Struggle, or something similar going forwards. He really has kind of taken ownership of the 13th Struggle song. Not really any other characters other than Larxene have used it recently. And the DM part of the song, of course, is really good. It just doubles down on that sort of back and forth nature you have, just like in the fight. Unfortunately, this isn't part of the actual OST, so it's not on Spotify or whatever, it just plays the normal song outside of the DM, which I think is a real shame because both the actual song plus the DM little mix of it comes together to make a great piece of music. One of my favorites in KH3 really, one of my favorite remixes. But that's really about it for Luxord. That's why he's my second favorite character in Kingdom Hearts. And yeah, sure, Ansem will always be my favorite. But with Ansem pretty much gone, we're not going to see more of him, let's be real. Luxord kind of is my favorite going forward for the new era. So I've got a lot of hopes riding on him. I don't think he'll ever be like particularly main character, I think he'll be a secondary character. But that's fine, you know, as long as he's got some interesting stuff and his character remains pretty intact, I'll be very happy with that. And I'm definitely very intrigued going forwards to see what more he's going to have and what he does. I'm guessing if you clicked on this video, there's a chance you're a Luxord fan as well, but what do you think about Luxord? What do you think about his new pronunciation? And like I said, what his actual somebody name might be, and how you feel about the character, and what you'd like to see from him going forwards. Leave a comment if you like, and you can also like the video and subscribe and blah 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 blah. Look at the description, there's things in there you can press. And it's a fun time. Follow me on Twitch, yes, Twitch is good. Where do you get your logs, dude? Oh, I can't. It's too good. The fact that they actually can flatten is too good. I want to see more DMCA. Oh god. DMCA. DMCA. You'll be in prison all your life. Copyright will fuck your wife. Never mind. And as always, thanks for watching.
You were born a simple